Good morning. Good morning. Happy terrific Tuesday. Today we're going to do to LLC or not to LLC. This is a common question, especially for beginners. And here's the deal, basically. Well, first off, do I buy in LLCs or not in LLCs? I 100% buy in LLCs. Um, my primary reason is because I don't want everybody to know what I own and where I own it. You can get a step further than that, which is going to be beyond the scope of this daily nugget here, but you can get into trusts and you certainly should get into trusts, especially when you have estate issues. And if you didn't know, yes, the US government, if you have a certain amount of money when you die, gets to take a big chunk of it. So when you get wealthy, and in real estate, it happens faster than you would think. Your assets get very big. You have to worry about estate tax and create trusts, et cetera, tax planning. Now, but for beginners, it's not that complicated. Don't get crazy about setting up some offshore company or, an LLC that owns an LLC that's owned by this. I hear this all the time. If you're a beginner, first off, why would you want an LLC? You want an LLC for limited liability protection, like legal protection. And if you're not from the United States, you can get sued for almost everything in the United States. You will get sued if you own property. Well, maybe not one, but I mean, if you own a bunch of property, people will trip and fall and you will get sued. Now, you don't need to have an LLC to be protected. You can own it in your own personal name. And when you have, let's say you own it in your own personal name. Um, if you own it in your own personal name, you still have insurance on the property, and insurance really consists of two things. It's for the building, basically to fix the building if there was like a fire or any kind of damage like that, not hurricanes and that kind of flooding. That's all separate insurance, by the way. Um, and you have liability insurance. So every base policy has a building insurance and liability insurance. And basically, if somebody's going to trip and fall on your property, the first thing they might not even, they say, hey, a lawyer will send you a letter. It's so much BS in the US. And they'll basically say, send me your insurance company's contact. They don't even want to talk to you, and they're just going to settle with your insurance company. Most times you don't have to do anything with that. You might have to answer a couple of emails. In like the craziest scenarios, I have been pulled into depositions. And if you want to be disgusted with life, go to a deposition where a guy says he tripped and fell on your property, and then he also tripped and fell at McDonald's, Walmart, whatever in different states for the last 7 years. But again, I get sidetracked here. So if you own in your personal name, you will be protected just as if you owned an LLC, because the LLC will still have that insurance. Now, what people think is in an LLC, and this is true, and if you talk to a lawyer, what they're going to tell you is if you own 10 properties, you should have 10 different LLCs. And why they say that is because if you have 10 different properties and somebody trips and falls or sues you on property A, or property one, well, if they're all owned by the same LLC, they can go after the assets of all of these 10 properties. But if you own each in a separate LLC, they only can sue that one LLC. This is true, but this is not practical, because if you're going to buy every property in an LLC, then you're going to have 10 separate bank accounts, 10 different companies, 10 separate tax returns. Even if they're disregarded entities, a lot of the state returns will have to be separate. 10 different QuickBooks. It's not practical at all. As a matter of fact, I look at these things in the big picture, like what is the liability you are trying to protect? If you own 10 properties, and most normal Americans that own 10, let's say you own 10 $200,000 properties, do you think it's likely that an American owns 10 free and clear $200,000 properties? Not likely. What they probably did was financed at least 80%. So basically 80% of 2 million is you are protecting in an LLC of 10 properties, $400,000 in equity. And nobody really is going to get that equity anyway, because if they wanted to, get those assets, they got to sell those properties. They're going to lose 10% there. So basically there's 200,000 in equity. So I personally will put 10 properties in an LLC, and I like to keep them in the same state. So I'll do like the real estate doctor, real estate doctor properties of Oklahoma LLC. And then like the next one would be real estate doctor properties of Oklahoma 2. and that'll be like my second 10 properties, et cetera, et cetera. You could do of the city, but I do that so I even know what, what's in this company. When I started, it was like, I would make up like Thor LLC. And, 5 years later, you're buying and selling and you have no idea what's in Thor. You have to have like a whole list of, what's owned by Thor. It's ridiculous. So, what I would tell you is you don't really need to buy each property in a separate LLC unless you're buying them free and clear. And if you're buying a property free and clear, meaning no debt on it, then it really is like putting $200,000 in cash. If it's $200,000 property, you should put it in a separate LLC. But most people don't do that. Now, going back to if you own it personally. So if you own it personally, you still have the same liability protection, but anybody and their mother in the United States can see who owns the property. Pretty easily. You just go on public records and, let's say I want to sue you. I look up your name, John Smith. I can see everything that John Smith owns. Now, that is also true of LLCs for the most part, except for a couple states, Wyoming being probably the most renowned. Wyoming, it's almost impossible to find out who owns the entity. And that's how you can get into trust and this, that, and the other thing. But I can tell you right now, I can't reverse engineer. If I'm looking for all the LLCs that John Smith owns, I can't really search like that. But if I see a property, I can see who the owner of the property is, and most of you can too. So if it's owned by Thor LLC, you can just look up in the Department of State who owns Thor LLC. And sometimes you have to go through the registered agent and down the line, but you can find it, and there's software that is basically going to give it to you now too. So all these limited liability protections just make things a little bit harder. And if you want to be super, super crazy about not letting people know who you own, you have to be a little bit more advanced. But if you're buying your first property, your first five, like, listen, you're not Warren Buffett. Don't go crazy. Like, don't spend thousands of dollars to set up some crazy structure because you think you're going to be, you know, Rockefeller or whoever, like the big real estate mogul is, BlackRock, because, you're not there yet. You don't need to do that. It's just going to be a waste of your time and inhibit, cost you more money in the beginning. Now, are there advantages to buying in your personal name? Yes. The advantages are if you're financing, and most Americans finance, you're going to get 1 point better interest rate. So if interest rates are 6.5%, you might, as an investor, usually you pay a point higher, but you may pay a little bit less than that. It's usually a point differential between owning in your personal name and owning an LLC. And also, you can, if you own in your personal name, you can finance more. So usually you can go up to 80 some. Now I see, and this changes. In 2008, you could get 115% of the purchase price. Now, what's really high is on an investment property, 85% if you own it in your personal name. If you don't own it in your personal name, it's hard to get 85%. You usually only get 75%. So the advantage in your personal name is you get a lower interest rate and you can finance more of the property, which you can't do in the LLC. Now, some people think they're slick and they say, well, they go to these seminars, they join these groups and they say, well, I'm going to buy it in my personal name, get the best financing possible, and then I will deed it from my personal name to an entity. So I get the best of both worlds. I get the better financing and then I get the LLC protection, which you can do, but be careful. Check the state that you're in. Like if you're in a state like Pennsylvania, Maryland, et cetera, you selling a property from your name to an LLC you own, you have to pay transfer taxes if they were separate entities, and technically they are. But then there's states that don't even have transfer taxes, like Ohio, where you don't have to pay transfer taxes anyway. And then there's states that exempt those types of sales. So you got to be careful what state you're talking about. Some guru comes on here and tells you, that's the way to do it. And then you find out that, you're going to have to pay $7,000 to do that in your state. I've seen that a million times. So I can go on and on and on about to LLC or not to LLC. So what I would tell you is in the beginning, it's easier not to LLC and it will get you a better interest rate and better financing, and you can do that. If you're going to LLC, don't LLC every single property. It's not practical. It's going to be a pain in your butt. But you could put up to about 10 properties. You could do whatever you want, but I do about 10 properties in one LLC in the same state. I like to do that because then you get one LLC that has to file in multiple states. Like I like that this LLC only files in Ohio or whatever it is. Okay, so I think that is the overview. If you guys have any questions, you can always email me. I'll put my email in the link below. And I hope you guys have the best day of your life. Thanks, guys.